You are now listening to Extracting Wisdom. Here to help you prevent the decay of your future is your host, Brandon Evert.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Extracting Wisdom. My name is Brandon Evert, and I hope everyone is having a great start to their year so far. I'm really excited about today's episode because we have another amazing guest on the show, and his name is Mr. Matt Pappas, who I've known for what seems like a lifetime. We both have lived on the honors floor in the same dorm our freshman year, and that's how we met, along with Zach Lee, who was on a previous episode. And then senior year of undergrad, Matt was my roommate, and we had an absolute blast senior year. And Matt, I have to say, he is an absolute workhorse. He graduated from Indiana University with highest honors, and he's currently attending medical school at Dartmouth College and is one of my closest personal friends. Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on, man.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Absolutely.
Class living with you, and maybe someday in the future when we're a little bit closer together, we could get together and have some drinks or something again.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. So let's let everyone get to know you a little bit first before we jump into what I really want to talk about tonight. So you are a current M1 at Dartmouth. So let's start with why medicine? Why did you choose to go the medical route?
It's funny you ask. I get that question a lot. And I think there is, for a lot of people, it starts off from a general desire to improve or make other people's lives better. But throughout your life, you get these subtle hints that just keep kind of pushing you in that direction before you really even realize that's what you want to do. And especially in today's time, I think it's just not enough to want to make a difference in somebody's life to push you into medicine. There are so many different ways you can do that outside of medicine. And to be honest, in life today, I think there are more impactful ways that you can change people's life without having to have a direct impact in medicine. So for me, it was really a personal calling. I had a lot of run-ins with medicine early on in my life, with my family members and chronic diseases. And when you're young, you don't really understand the impact that things have on you. For example, my grandfather had a myriad of diseases and ended up passing away a couple of years ago. But when I was very young, he had dissecting aortic aneurysm, which was a very traumatic experience at such a young age. And being so young, you don't really understand the gravity of the situation. But as you grow up, thankfully, he had a surgery, and I was able to spend 20 more years of my life with him. And I grew up with a grandfather. But I didn't realize at the time that none of that would have happened if it wasn't for medicine and for the doctors that diagnosed him and took care of him during that experience. So I think there are these little pushes throughout life that will kind of sit with you and resonate in the back of your mind that maybe medicine is something that's right for you. And I think that was the overall experience for me. And then I think there's another side to wanting to go into medicine as well. And that's looking at yourself as a person and what do you find interesting and gratifying in life? For me, I've realized that I grew up in a very privileged family. I came from a middle-class background, and I was able to have a good education and attend IU. And it's something that a lot of people aren't fortunate enough to have. And given that, I think being able to realize that you have this gift and you have knowledge and a desire for knowledge and wanting to help others, medicine just seemed like the natural route for me. And then once you realize that you want to go into medicine, you start having all these other experiences to try to reaffirm that decision you're looking towards making, because it is a big decision.
It's huge. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's really exciting when you get to medical school or dental school. As you go through your classes and your curriculum, you really start realizing, wow, like I chose the right career path. Like this is what my life is supposed to be. So that's awesome that's what you're experiencing now. So let's talk about this. So before we hear about how your first semester of medical school went, how was your transition from undergrad at IU to medical school? Was it a big difference? Was it the course load, the classes? What was it? How was your transition?
Yeah, so the transition phase was unique. It just, for me, I didn't take a gap year, and coming straight from undergraduate, it didn't feel as much of a transitional phase as for a lot of students, especially in my class. We have a older class. I think the typical age of a first year medical student is actually 27 or 28 years old.
Really?
So we have a lot of kids returning from a normal class type schedule where you go to class and study every day. They haven't done that for multiple years. So it was a transition for a lot of people. For me, I don't think it was so much a transition in that essence, but just a transition in not only the workload, but the type of work and the amount that you're doing, and realizing that you really need to sort of fine tune your study habits and figure out something that works best for you was the biggest transition for me. Undergraduate is what it is. You go to class and you do your work, but in medical school, I think the work that you do carries a lot more meaning. And that's something that you have to understand when you're studying. You're not just studying for a test anymore. You're studying for your own future and the future of your patients.
100%. And that's something we're going to get into in just a minute and kind of dive into that a little bit deeper. But before we get into that, another thing I like to ask everybody that I have on the show is, how do you typically like to study? Do you like to study by yourself? Do you like to study in groups? Do you like flashcards or just written notes? Like, what do you typically do?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me personally, I've always been one who excels studying alone. And I know in medical school, that's probably not the preferred way to study, because there is so much information. A lot of students can bring something to the table that I may not personally know or be able to understand, or they may contribute to the concept that we're learning more in depth than the knowledge I don't have. And that's something I'm still learning to do. So I would say my study habits right now are definitely a lot of note taking. I like to still write because I think there's a lot of muscle memory rather than just typing. I think writing for me while I'm learning is very useful. Something that I am also still getting used to is technology. I mean, you know me from undergraduate. I was
maybe not the most technically savvy person, but
almost every day I think you were showing me something new about it. But it's really nice here. So we were given iPads and Apple Pencils, and
they make a world of difference, don't they?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing about studying is realizing what worked for you in undergraduate may work for you in medical school, but it might also not work. And I think you have to keep an open mind to new things. So I've tried using the iPad and the Apple Pencil, and it's honestly changed my life.
As in, you like it?
I love it. I haven't opened a single paper, and I haven't used pencil once since I've been here. Everything has been on my iPad or my computer. So it was a little bit of a learning curve at first, trying to figure out all the systems, but it's worth the effort, and keeping an open mind to these things is very beneficial.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm the same way too. It's all digital. It's awesome to have all your notes, and I'm assuming you have your textbooks on your iPad too.
I do, yeah.
Okay, and it's just so nice to have everything in the same place, especially with the Apple Pencil. Being able to like go through the physical writing motions, but be in a digital format is really nice. We're saving trees at the same time, and then I've talked about in previous episodes too, and I know you use this a little bit, is then taking your notes and transitioning them into other softwares. Like Anki is a big one. I know you use that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Anki is solely, I would say, what this medical school uses to get by. It's just very useful. One of the biggest study tools for me that I've found works is repeatedly quizzing myself. The volume of information that we get in medical school is so dense and so rich. I remember actually just last week, we had 6 lectures in one day, and I was just looking through the amount of slides that we had, and it was over 450 slides of material for just one day's of lecture. And each slide has multiple points and ideas and concepts on it. So how can you possibly remember 1,500 things from one day of lecture when you have exams every 3 days? It gets to be a lot. So the best way that I found to retain that information is to use technology and these study tools where you're not just rereading material and trying to get it to sink into your head, but actively investigating questions and trying to apply the concepts to maybe a clinical situation or something that interests you, that sparks your attention. And these programs help you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Anki's super helpful. And then, I'll also go and take that information after just drilling it over and over again. That's the one nice thing about Anki is you can just drill those points over and over again until they're pretty much stuck there. And then you can kind of take all that information that's stuck in your brain and kind of connect it. I like to draw pictures sometimes on my iPad or just flow charts or those kind of things that just kind of really integrate everything together. So definitely going digital and using flashcards and kind of multiple methods of studying is definitely the way to go to tackle all this material that's getting thrown at us on a day-to-day basis.
And it saved a lot of sore backs.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to lug those textbooks around every day. Okay, well, very good. So what I really wanted to talk about today, and this is something that you brought up last night as we were kind of talking about the podcast, being a pre-dental or pre-medical student, it's a massive time commitment. And in order to make it through and retain information and honestly be sane at the end of these 4 years, you have to have some sort of purpose. You have to have some sort of reason or motivation to go through this madness of med school or dental school. So why do you think having this purpose or why or reason is so important?
I think it keeps you grounded. It's very easy to get, and not just day to day, but all of the workload and the amount of studying that you have to do. It can swamp you. And if you lose sight of why you're there or lose groundedness in some greater meaning and some future idea of why you are going through all of this, it really can put a burden on not just your studying, but your life in general. So I think that's one of the big keys is keeping a wide focus and realizing that this is something that's going to benefit you throughout your career and the rest of your life and your patients, not just you as a physician or a dentist, but understanding that I think is a big part of being able to get through these professional schools while maintaining your sanity. And I would just like to add too, having a mindset is good, but you have to be able to implement that mindset and really change the way that you're thinking about studying. I know we always joke around that in undergraduate, 80% of the stuff that we would study, we just needed to study to pass an exam or to do well on the DAT or the MCAT,
right?
To get into school. But now I think the things that we're learning are going to impact our careers. So we're not just studying to pass that exam anymore to get into school. I think we're studying to really do well as a clinician. And that should be the goal in anybody's career, whether you're in a healthcare profession or not. So I think changing the mindset about the way that we study and the way that we view work is the biggest key to having success in medical school. And I think that adds a little bit of meaning to why you're doing these things. Just trying to keep that in the back of your mind every day, whether it's, at the end of the night, just kind of taking 5 minutes before you go to bed instead of being on your phone and looking at YouTube videos or whatever you might be doing.
Which we're all guilty of.
True. Very true. Instead of doing that, maybe just take 5 minutes and think about something that happened throughout your day that you really found impactful, whether it be in a positive or negative way. Listen, med school is tough. Dental school is tough. Not everything that you do, you're going to enjoy. There are going to be a lot of hard days. So you have to be able to learn to focus on the things that you do enjoy and that you do value and realize, hey, this is something that really helps me throughout my studying. If that's taking a 1 hour break and going to the gym every day because it relieves your stress, then you really need to do that because it's going to help you through school in the long run. The people who I found most successful throughout school are not the people who study from the moment they wake up till the moment they go to bed. It's the people who have a great routine where they have a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's so many great points there. And I totally agree with that. I mean, sometimes studying for hours and hours and hours on end is not the most efficient way to study. And you're going to get burnt out from that. You need to be able to take time for yourself. And I was just listening to a podcast the other day. For those of you listening, it's the Life and Dentistry podcast. They have a great podcast, but one of their guests said, in order to be selfless and help all your patients, you have to first be selfish and take care of yourself and remind yourself of why you're going through all of this. And it's a really important concept that will keep you from burning out. And just an example of something that you were just talking about. I was in a lecture yesterday and we're talking about oral fungal infections. How fun is that to sit there for 2.5 hours listening about oral fungal infections? But you got to remember, in the back of my head, as much as I wanted to, check Facebook or go on Instagram or something like that, I'm thinking in the back of my head, well, what if a future patient comes into my office and presents with these symptoms that they're talking about, and I wasn't paying attention to that lecture at that point because I was too busy and got bored. That's going to be a huge disservice to that patient. So you got to have that reason and got to have that future clinician mindset, like you were talking about, and just roll with the punches. And you might not even like it, but you're going to sure enjoy helping that patient and being able to recall that information from that lecture.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I don't think what we're trying to suggest here is that you should memorize every single thing from your lecture, because God forbid you have that one patient with that 1 in a million rare.
Oh, of course.
I think the idea behind it is that not necessarily knowing every little detail about possible adverse events that could happen in a clinical setting, but more so being able to recognize things and be an advocate for your patients when something isn't going properly. You have to understand to be able to put yourself in that mindset of thinking outside of just this clinical picture that you've been given of the patient. And that's largely due to interest in the patient, and that comes from interest in your studies and in your school. And that's not saying that maybe if a patient walks in 15 years from now with some crazy fungal infection, you can say, oh, I remembered that from my lecture, but maybe in 15 years from now, this patient just isn't presenting like a normal patient to you in your clinic, and you say, something's not really right here. I really think something else might be going on. I'm not really sure what it is, but let's try to figure this out. And then you can go back and do your research. So we're not trying to say that you have to remember everything right now. And that's impossible. Nobody can do that. If you are, we'll just give you a job right now. Don't even bother finishing medical school. I think we're just trying to change the way that we think about these issues to, I just need to know this to pass the test, versus now it should be, I should know this in order to help my patients further down the road. And if I can't remember this, at least I can be an advocate for them down the road and kind of put 2 and 2 together and figure out maybe something here is going wrong that's worth further investigation.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And going off of that too, I'm not saying, I need to know that this is, Candida albicans and this is the the fungus that's infecting you, although that's the most common one. But being able to recognize certain signs or symptoms and know where to go to get that information, then that comes from that mindset. And it all starts in medical school or dental school, that mindset of, yes, I'm going to be using this for the rest of my life. We should not just be cramming information and then dumping all of it right after an exam, because this needs to be retained for, we're going to be using this for the rest of our lives to be, amazing clinicians in the future. So yeah, that's awesome. And just another thing too, like emotional burnout, you kind of going along with working out, you got to take care of your mind too while you're going through dental school. You can't spend all of your time studying. You got to have a life outside of professional school is what I'm trying to say. You got to have a life outside of professional school for your own sake, because you're not going to be productive and help future patients if you don't take care of yourself first.
I completely agree with that. And I have already seen that in the, 6-7 months we've been in medical school. It's hard to believe that at a place like an Ivy League medical school, you would have students already experiencing burnout, because these people who you are going to school with are truly amazing people. They've done so much in their life already. Some of my classmates have PhDs, masters. They've been in the military for 15 years. They are incredible people, and they're so strong-minded. But there's something about the persistency of medical school and dental school and how regular having such a horrible schedule and a high volume workload is, that it just gets to people, even the strongest minded people. So the way that I approach it is, yes, one, finding hobbies and stuff that you like to do to just get your mind off of studying. And I know it seems counterintuitive, because if you're not doing well in your classes or you're struggling with studying, your thought initially is like, oh man, I got to go hit the books more. But it's not going to work, at least in my opinion, from what I found. When you feel burnout, the best thing to do is to get your mind off of what's burning you out and do something to relieve that stress. So that's the first part, is find something you like to do. It doesn't have to be physical. It can be anything that you just enjoy.
Totally.
Baking a cake, if that's what you want to do. There actually, I was reading today, there was a study that said, having oriented tasks like baking with directions can take your mind off of something that's bothering you very easily. And so that's my first point of advice. My second one would be to have friends and make time for your friends. I mean, you and I are halfway across the country and we talk almost every day, if not every single day.
Right.
And just keeping that emotional connection with people is very important. And I would also like to add, in medical school, you have to have friends to realize and share that emotional burden with you. It's great. And that's the benefit, I think, of a lot of study groups that people form, is not necessarily to study, but sharing the burden of studying together. And it makes it seem a little bit more bearable. But I would like to add that having friends outside of school is just as important, if not more important. Just someone to get your mind off school and sort of out of this reality that you live in, because it's very easy to sort of metaphorically jump down the rabbit hole when you're in school and just put your blinders on and say, my life is school and that's it, and nothing else occurs outside. And having friends outside of the school that you're in can really help take your mind off of that very sort of conical focus.
Yeah, and definitely. And it's important to have, be a part of both of those groups. It's really important to bond with your classmates because, they're pretty much your secondary family, and they're the ones that actually understand what you're going through. And it's important to bond with those people because your friends outside of school, they have no clue what you go through on a daily basis. And a very few, a very small percentage of people actually understand what it's like to go through the rigors of a professional program like med school or dental school. So that's super important. And, those are your study buddies when you need them, because they know all that information. But when you need a break and when you're feeling that burnout and you just want to have a little fun, I'm not saying you can't have fun with your medical school or dental school classmates, which obviously you can, but it's always nice to stay in touch with high school friends and college friends, because those friendships and relationships that you've built are so important, and it's important to maintain them too.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Good point.
Well, I think we're coming to a close. It's, just bottom line, it's so important to have a reason and remind yourself on a daily basis why you're going through medical school and dental school. Because when you have that reason and you take some time for some self-reflection, like you talked about before bed, or, in my case, I do it every morning. It's really important to have that time, by the way, too, just to sit down and reflect on what's going on around you, what you need to get done that day, and your reason for doing all of this, because it really is a big deal and a big workload. And it's a struggle, but obviously it's so worth it in the end. You're going to impact so many different lives and improve so many lives, whether it's, health, or when you're working on knee replacements down the road and you become a orthopedic surgeon, or, I'm doing smile reconstructions. Like you make such a big impact. You've got to keep that, in your sights when you're going through medical school and dental school. You can't lose sight of that. But before we let you go, Mr. Matt, do you have any, I'm going to put you on the spot, but do you have any pieces of advice for either pre-med students or pre-dental students on getting into school?
In getting into school?
Yeah, or just in general.
I'll give you my idea for both, in general and getting into school, because I think they're tied together. I think too much in life people emphasize getting into school is this formula and there's these steps you should be taking. And while there is some truth to that, I don't think it's a necessity. So my one piece of advice would just be to learn how to put yourself out there and don't be afraid to try new things. For example, your freshman year in undergrad is a great time to do that. Try everything under the sun that interests you. If you feel overwhelmed, that's okay. And that's part of the process. And then you can say, okay, maybe I like this organization a little bit more than this one. Or maybe I like this playing on this intramural team. That's very important to me. So try everything that you can your freshman year and maybe your sophomore year, or when you're still in your undergrad. And pick 2 or 3 things that you think are very important to you and what you like to do. And I think having that sort of baseline level of extracurricular activities will keep you grounded and sane throughout your undergraduate. And eventually you'll realize once you get to applying for these schools that all of these sort of formula markers that you're told that you need to hit, you have to have research, or you have to have volunteering, community work. By nature of people who are looking to apply to medical school and dental school, we already are doing that in our own lives regardless. That's just the type of people we are. So my biggest piece of advice for anybody applying to pre-professional schools is to stop caring so much about the small details. Just go through life, make sure you make time for yourself and your friends. I'm not saying go fail out of every class. Grades are important, but they're not an end-all be-all.
Yeah, and I know we've said this many times, man, I wish, we would have went out that one more night and, went out to the bars and had a drink or did whatever, went to that football game. Or man, why did I sweat that grade so much? In the end, the grades are important, but you can't beat yourself up over one grade, or even if you tried your best on an exam and maybe didn't get the grade that you want, it's okay. Don't sweat it. Work hard and, go kill the next exam, but don't beat yourself up over it. It's so important now looking back on undergrad, now being in dental school. It's a huge point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it keeps carrying over too. If you can't learn how to let things go and to not care so much about things that you think might be important. And this is the most difficult advice to give somebody who has that mindset of a pre-professional school, because we care so much about
and we were there too. Yeah.
So it's hard to take this advice, but I think it's something that hopefully you can learn on your own early on. And that's sort of the point that I'm trying to come full circle with my advice, is that when you learn to not care so much about certain things that aren't as important to you as others, I think it's a good experience to have. And the earlier on in your career you can do that, for example, going in your undergrad in your freshman year and getting involved in a lot of different things, learning how to say no and learning when enough is enough, and learning the things that you need to do throughout your daily life that's not related to school to maintain your sanity, to maintain your mental health, to maintain your physical health. That's going to carry you farther than any other thing will, extracurricularly and curricularly.
Very well said. I'm not going to say anything more because I think you hit the nail right on the head there. So Matt, thank you so much for being on the show. I think we're going to wrap it up here. And I know we talked about we'll have another episode on in the near future where you and our buddy Zach will be on, and we'll do something. I'm not 100% sure what we'll talk about, but we will catch up with you again very soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, buddy. Take care.